Well, the day's finally come. College basketball is back, and the Xavier Musketeers back in action tonight. An exciting episode of the Musketeer Madness podcast. Ben Haller alongside John Baldridge, and a lot of storylines going into this first game, but overall, just very excited for college basketball to be back.
Yeah, it's a long time overdue. It feels like it's been a while since it's Xavier basketball season, and
Yeah.
glad to be back. You've been talking about it. It's bright and early, getting ready for this today, and just excited to get back inside Cintas, get back with all the fans in there this year, and gonna be exciting. Sean's back for his second season and or third season, excuse me. Looking forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, third season, that second stint. And I think, always the first day of this college basketball season, we talk about just how much we've been looking forward to this and just how long we've been waiting and how long it's felt. It's felt like even longer than most years, just with how last year's team struggled, how how the way that the ending of last year's season wasn't as fun, I think, for many Xavier fans. And also to it's a long time since we've seen two guys who are going to play tomorrow night play, and Zach Freemantle and Jerome Hunter. And that's, I think, one of the biggest storylines. You're playing a Texas Southern team that obviously it's a bye game. It's one of those games. I think the crazy stats, Xavier's won like 33 straight season openers. But to see Freemantle and Hunter back in action is, I think, what a lot of people are looking forward to.
Yeah, I thought that you mentioned a good point. It was kind of a struggle last year, but you saw when Sean talked about it in his presser last week, playing really well against Dayton. You put up 98 points. You win that game against a good Flyers team back in that exhibition. Then you also go up to South Bend, play a closed door exhibition, played really well against them. And to have Fremantle back, have Hunter back, have a new chemistry of a new team this year, a lot of promise for this team this season. I'm really looking forward to it. Looking forward to take on a Texas Southern team. They're not no slouch by any means, so you got to take this team serious tonight. And I think it's going to be a promising year for the Musketeers. I said earlier on in one of our podcasts, I think the potential is a ceiling for this team this year, and looking forward to just finally taking on a team in a real game tonight.
Yeah, we talked about it off the podcast a little bit. I think I'm getting increasingly optimistic every day about this team before today coming in to this morning, and for many reasons. I think the national attention around Xavier is getting higher and higher heading into the year. I think at the end of last week, I saw a couple of different Final Four predictions by college basketball analysts who had Xavier in their Final Four as a dark horse team. Um, I've seen some individual top 25 rankings that have them in that top 15 level. I don't think they're getting the respect as much from the ESPN outlets like Xavier never does, or from CBS is kind of like on the fence. But Fox obviously feels very highly about Xavier. John Fanta said that he could see Xavier as a dark horse Elite Eight team. I feel at 68 too. Our own network, Jeff Goodman and Rob Doster have said some really good things about Xavier this year too. It's not just us who are optimistic about this Xavier team. I think the public opinion is there's a wide variety. I think some people aren't very high on him, but I think there are a lot of people who agree with us.
Yeah, and I think that's the case because of the new guys they brought in. Sean Miller has always been known as a defensive coach we talked about, but has a lot of good scorers on this team with Conwell this year. You look at bringing in Maddox. I mean, you have a very good front court with Hunter coming back and Freeman. We talked about it. Also bringing in John Hughley down there. So a lot of promise for a team that has a lot of depth. I mean, you lose a player, but you still have 9 players who are going to be in that lineup every day. And I think that is a thing that you didn't have last year. And to your point, Ben, I think that's something that can help you later in the year when you go into deeper parts in the Big East.
A little later on the podcast, we'll talk about our preseason predictions. We'll give some preseason awards for the Xavier team. I want to talk about Sean Miller had his first, like final preseason presser. It might have been yesterday or 2 days ago. A couple of interesting things I saw from that presser. Number one, and this is something I was interested in to look at the Dayton exhibition. He said he's probably going to be a 9-man rotation, which I don't think it is any surprise to that. I'm not sure when it was made official, but on I think it's the media guide, it says Roddy Anderson will officially redshirt this season. He's been practicing, but he will exercise a redshirt. So the 9 players are obviously going to be the starting lineup we saw against Dayton with Conwell, McKnight, Foster, Swain, Freemantle, and then the 4 bench players. I'm assuming in that 9-man rotation is going to be Trey Green, Dante Maddox, John Hughley, and Jerome Hunter. with the chance of Cameron Fletcher working his way in there, but I don't know about that.
I think they'll go 9 this year. Talking about, I think a lot of promise in those guys we brought in, as I talked about. But where do you see, and I think it's a question too to be brought in, is Jerome Hunter coming back? Do you see him getting a lot of minutes to start? I think they kind of edge him slowly into the mix as we get later into the year.
You stole the question I was going to ask you later. It's
Yeah.
going to be the role of Freemantle and Hunter. I think it's going to be different. I think they're dealing with different injuries. Everything I've heard from Fremantle's injury, there were very highly thought of doctors that were working on Fremantle and the surgeries and everything like that. And everything I've seen says he's in the best shape of his life. So for Fremantle, I think it's different than Hunter, where I think Fremantle will be, back to being the number one option for Xavier this season and wanting to get him the ball down in the post. He'll play 30 plus minutes a game. Um, his role changes a little bit with Traore now on the bench, sidelined with injury. He'll be out for the year. So when John Hughley's not in the game, Fremantle's going to be playing the five, which we know as great of a career as Zach Fremantle's had at Xavier so far, at least with individual numbers and everything like that. The defense and the rebounding has been up and down, and he needs to be consistent in that area. But the playing time, he's going to have a lot of time to work on that. With Jerome Hunter, it's interesting. He I know it's just an exhibition, but he did exceed my expectations a little bit in the Dayton exhibition. He had 10 points. He had a couple of really nice buckets, and he played really good defense. The pick and roll defense for Jerome Hunter was excellent. Um, just in the past, Xavier has not had bigs who have been great defending the pick and roll. So I think that was a promising sign to see. Um, I think he was like the eighth or ninth off the bench, though, in that exhibition. I think he works his way up. I think you could see him back to a sixth man role, where there's some games where he can be playing a lot of minutes, 25 plus minutes, but I think they're definitely going to ease him back into that.
Yeah, Traore losing him, I think, was a huge loss to the rebounding for the Musketeers this year. And Sean talked about it in his press conference last week. I think the thing to be answered now is how the pace of play for the Musketeers will be. And on the offside of the ball, I mean, you try to get some defensive boards with Hughley down there. You got Hunter and Freemantle. And the question is, when you get tired down in the front court, as we get into later parts of the year, you get into the Big East, you get into the Big East tournament, can they be able to keep up that pace of play? We saw that a couple years ago, a problem when you had Nunji down low, got a little tired when Freemantle got injured. So I think that's the question to be wondered right now, Ben, is what's that pace of play going to look like this year? Early on, of course, as you have some time to keep the bodies healthy through the start of the season.
Yeah, and that's something else that Sean talked about in his preseason presser was just that he still wants to play fast. Look, last year we know Sean Miller always wants to play fast. Last year was kind of an anomaly how actually fast they played, one of the fastest teams in the country in terms of pace of play. Now, it's fair to think that a lot of that maybe is because they were really poor offensively in the front court. There just weren't many bigs on that team who could score. And that's why all of them, if you depending on where you put Dalen Sway to the backcourt or front court, all of them transferred out. And Xavier gets a full new rehaul, including Zach Freeman and Jerome Hunter coming back, and then John Hughley stepping up into that role. Dalen Swain's going to have to play bigger. But the point is that I thought last year they were playing so fast just because they wanted the guards to do the work. Davion McKnight, we could see, loved playing fast. And Quincy Oliveri could go fast. Desmond Claude could go fast. But Sean Miller said, no, this is something that he wants to do no matter who is on the court. And with the injury of Traore, you're going to see smaller lineups on the Xavier team, which means they're going to be able to go a lot quicker. So that pace of play is not something I would expect to slow down too much.
Yeah, I mean, you had Gitas, Sasha, and Lazar last year, three
Yeah.
guys who talked to Dante Jackson, one of the assistant coaches last year, and brought him in really late into that summer. So you didn't have him the whole summer. And also, you expected sometime to have Hunter back. You never got him back. Same thing with Freemantle. Never got both of the two guys back. But this year, you had the whole summer of Hughley. Unfortunately, Traore goes down, but you still have Hunter and Freemantle. So I think you had more time to have, production inside in the summer, working with these guys in the front court. And hopefully, I mean, now you got 1 year experience with Davion McKnight in the front court and back for his second year now as your point guard. So I think you have a lot of promise for a team that has a lot of depth and now some expertise inside.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that they have so much depth is something that Miller's talked about a lot, and something that can help playing fast because if guys get more tired, you have a lot of options on the bench. Last year, they did have games where they play 9 or 10 guys, but the guys on the back end of that bench were a little questionable on how productive they could really be. So that pace of play, I think, is going to be big. Another thing Miller talked about was the 3-point shooting. He thinks this is going to be one of his best 3-point shooting teams yet. Um, and you bring in two high volume 40% 3-point shooters and Ryan Conwell and Dante Maddox. That's going to help things out so much. Interested to see how Jerome Hunter's improved his 3-point shot. He took a couple of those in the exhibition. Same with Dalen Swain. I'd heard things about him improving his 3-point shot. But I think he went 1 for 1 in that Dayton exhibition. The more guys that they can get to be able to shoot threes is going to help them down the road.
Yeah, you also bring in Marcus Poster, who had a really good game, I thought, to start in that expedition at home when you had the blue-white scrimmage and also against Dayton. But I think it's interesting. I think the biggest interesting thing to talk about is Dalen Swain when you bring back a guy who played well last year. I thought kind of struggled in the exhibitions we had to start the season, but I think where his mix fills in, if he can be a guy really good, has a lot of size. He's a 6'4" dude, excuse me, 6'8" dude. So
Yeah.
you're hoping a lot from him this year, and hopefully he can perform a little better offensively on the side of the ball.
So we could talk a little bit about Texas Southern going into tonight. This isn't once again, it's a bye game, and Texas Southern's a team coming into obviously take these rankings with a grain of salt. Texas Southern is sitting at 284 right now in the preseason Ken Palm ratings. They are not projected to be a very good offensive team. 331st offense in the Ken Palm projection rankings, but their defense is pretty solid, 182. So it's going to be strength on strength. Xavier, there's no question. I don't know what miracle it would take for Xavier to be more of a defensive team this year. They're definitely going to be more of an offensive team. So you're going to see Texas Southern very defensive. So you're going to see the strength on strength with Xavier's offense against Texas Southern's defense.
Yeah, and I think that helps too. The defense gets better in Centos, and it's a tough
Yeah.
place to play, especially for non-conference teams who haven't played there before. And using that to the Musketeers' advantage here tonight, I think just having the crowd back in there too is going to help when you have a full capacity in there tonight. And I think that's going to be interesting. But seeing just how this team comes together, that chemistry we talked about all off season long, bringing in some new guys. But I'm really interested to see how Zach Freemantle does tonight. And hopefully he goes out there and plays very strong. There's a lot of talk about him. And I'm sure the crowd's going to be very excited to see number 32 in a uniform tonight.
Yeah, we talked about it right at the open of the podcast. When things to take away within talking about this game, it is probably how Fremantle and Hunter look. And then also, it'll be cool to see Xavier get their fans get their first look in person, at least at all these incoming transfers. Very experienced team, but no freshmen too, so no freshmen coming in. But yeah, that's going to be pretty cool too. The Another thing I'm excited to see selfishly is the Cintas reaction to Fremantle. Fremantle when he gets announced in the starting lineup, and then Jerome Hunter when he makes his first appearance, assuming he comes off the bench. That's going to be pretty fun to see. I know Cintas Center and Xavier fans have been waiting for that a long time. I think it's going to be a great atmosphere tonight overall at Cintas. Like we said, just starved for a good season after the way things went last year. Texas Southern, they actually made the SWAC championship last year, but they got beat pretty bad by Grambling State, and they went 16-17 in the regular season. So no postseason tournament for them. Actually, they did play in a postseason tournament. One that the collegeinsider.com tournament, they were a first round exit to Tarleton State. So or Tarleton State rather. So
They're trying to get it right over there.
yeah, a lot of R's in that, a lot of R's in S, but they have they have had a lot of success as a program. Antoine Davis was their coach for a while, and I mean, if this sounds familiar to Xavier fans, this was the 116 game in 2018 in Chris Mack's final year. That was a very high scoring game. It was like 100 something to 80 something. JP McKeer had like 26 points. Trayvon Blewett did as well. But this is not that 2018 Texas Southern team.
I just think it's going to be exciting to see, Sean Miller back out there. I think the crowd after the year they had last year was a struggling year. You brought in some guys from overseas who didn't live up to the expectations
Yeah.
you expected to have. And but having Davion McKnight back, a guy who you really led on last year, I think he's going to be the captain of this ball club this year. And hopefully, Xavier can come out here from day one and play well tonight and really build on a good season. I think this year is a big year for Sean Miller. I mean, you had a really good first year, but some might say that was a Travis Steele led team. Last year was kind of a struggle, but if you can really put together a good year, you brought in a lot of good talent this year, and hopefully it builds from game one tonight.
Yeah, something interesting. It was on a Field of 68 podcast, actually. Rob Doster, John Fana were two of the ones talking about it. Um, it feels like every 4 or 5 years there's a big year where the coaching carousel, and John Calipari kind of moved that carousel a season ago, or this last offseason. And this is where you got nervous about Sean leaving. If you were a Xavier fan, now I, it doesn't feel like there's going to be that many big job openings coming up soon. So this might be a run where Xavier doesn't have to worry about losing Sean for a while, and he can really build his own program in his eyes, get his own players. Now any Travis Steele recruited player is out the window right now, obviously except for Jerome Hunter and Zach Freemantle. So I think he can really make it his team and his program. Let's make some predictions though. We're gonna do our preseason predictions and preseason teams. Um, so
Let me just say something. Yeah, the way you bring that up real fast before we get over to predictions, you talked a lot of different, or you hear a lot of different coaches talk, especially from Big East Media Day, like Rick Pitino and Dan Hurley and some of the big names in the Big East. They really respect Sean Miller, and the love
yeah.
for Sean Miller is, indefinite inside this Xavier community. But I think also outside of the Big East, you see how much the respect for Sean Miller is, it not just his time here at Xavier, but also at Arizona, and a guy back here with a very good team this year, Ben. I think the promise is very high for this Xavier team this year, but it's going to be exciting just to see Sean's team out there tonight.
So preseason predictions and preseason kind of awards. I guess we'll start with our awards. We'll start with the big one. Just overall preseason player of the year. Who's going to have the biggest impact when all is said and done at the end of the year?
I hate to been talking about him a lot, but I'm going to go with Davion McKnight. I think he's a guy that, as I mentioned a second ago, he's the captain, he's the leader on this team, a guy who, even with a struggling team last year, was still someone you really led on. And I think, it runs through him this year. It runs through the inside to get the ball, McKnight to get the ball inside of Hunter and Fremantle. And hopefully, he'll be a guy we can lead on and take us to a promising place as we get into March.
Yeah, for me, I got to go Zach Freemantle. I think last week's Dayton exhibition game was a healthy reminder of what Freemantle can do. We had a quiet 17 points, and that's what Freemantle does. You watch a game, he does all the simple things, and you look back at the box score and you say to yourself, Freemantle had 17 points in this game,
Yeah,
but that's
yeah.
those are the quiet nights that he has and how consistent he's been. If he stays healthy, he's going to be one of the best bigs in the Big East. He's going to be one of the best scoring bigs in all of the country, and he's going to be the biggest impact on why Xavier does anything in the postseason this year. And I think he's hungry for that. You saw it on the Sean Miller podcast when they interviewed him. It'll be his first full year of college basketball. That's not COVID. That's not with him being injured. That's if he could stay healthy. And this is year number 6 for him. So I think he's starved for that. How about a defensive player of the year preseason? Who do you think will make the biggest defensive impact?
I think you mentioned Zach Freeman. I mean, he shows the most hustle on this team. He's in the best shape of his life, they say. And a guy who, as you mentioned, is very hungry, starving for a basketball season. Here we finally are. And I think, he's going to be a guy who are expecting a lot of rebounds. You lose in Trevori this year, so you have to really lead on guys inside. And a guy that you expect to lead on is Zach Freeman, who's been there before, and hopefully he can do it again this season.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point about how this all gets switched up with Traore going out. If Lucina Traore was not injured and healthy this year, he probably would be my pick. Um, I don't know if I could trust Fremantle 100% defensively yet, just what we've seen from the first 4 or 5 years. I'm going to go Dalen Swain with the Traore injury. I think that it slides a lot of things, and Dalen Swain's versatility defensively, I think, is very important to this team. He's going to be he's going to have to be able to guard a four, a power forward, while and also be able to guard a three or a small forward, maybe even a guard. And I think he has the ability to do that. He's got that 6'7", 6'8" frame, but he's really quick. Probably the most athletic player on this Xavier team. And I think that one again, the versatility is the biggest thing for me, and putting Swain as that preseason defensive player of the year. Next one I have here, newcomer of the year. A lot of times we do newcomer and freshman. There are no freshmen on this team, so they can't do the freshman of the year. But out of all the transfers incoming, who's your newcomer of the year?
That's a tough one. I mean, I really think it's going to be an interesting battle between Dante Maddox and also Ryan Conwell. I'm going to go Conwell just because of the hype he's brought in here from Indiana State. You know, a guy they expected a lot of this year, not just to shoot the ball, but also hopefully a very good defensive player trying to slow down tempos of other team. And Conwell, was a guy who averaged 16 and 6 last year. So I'm expecting a lot from him this year, and hopefully he's a guy you can expect a lot from as a Xavier fan.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Maddox a lot, but I think this is another easy one with Ryan Conwell. Now, here's the interesting thing about Conwell is, well, his recruitment was interesting too. With Dante Maddox, it was very open. You knew who the runners up were. Louisville, Michigan were in the mix. I think Creighton was in the mix as well. Those are the final four with Maddox, obviously, along with Xavier. And so you get to see where he was at with the other schools that were interested in him. Ryan Conwell's recruitment, there was not a lot of information on. I think the only information that was leaked that he was looked at by South Carolina, looked at by Indiana, and looked at by it didn't even sound like he was looked at by Xavier until there was a random crystal ball prediction on him, and then he ended up committing to Xavier. But what that means is I don't know if Xavier fans are ready and know exactly what to expect from him. The Field of 68 just put him at 35 in their preseason top 100 players. I saw a Big East ranking with the Big East best Big East incoming transfers. It had him as number one. All Big East third team coming into the year. He's someone that scores on such a high level. To put it into perspective, Quincy Oliveri a season ago set the record, Xavier record for 3-pointers in a season. Ryan Conwell made more 3-pointers a season ago than Quincy Oliveri did. Now, combine Ryan Conwell with the fact that in a Sean Miller offense, what has Sean Miller done so well in the last couple of years? It's being able to transform these mid-major guards who score at a really high level, who shoot at a really high level. Sule Boom and Quincy Oliveri, two specific examples, and be able to get them shots and get them consistent opportunities, and to lead the offense. Sule Boom and Quincy Oliveri, the last two leading scorers on these Xavier teams specifically. Coming into the year, Conwell has that same archetype, or at least close as those two players, but a way bigger recruit. So put him in a Sean Miller system. I really do think Ryan Conwell is going to have a special season. I think it's going to be, I mean, he was my runner-up when talking about preseason player of the year between him and Zach Freeman. Conwell's going to be awesome. Um,
When we talked about tempos, and I think the way Xavier played so fast last year, playing so fast again this year, is going to help when you have 9 or 10 deep on this bench because you have guys like Traeger we've even talked about and Davion McKnight, and you bring in Conwell and Foster and Maddox. I mean, we have so many options on that bench in the backcourt to be able to change it up so quickly. The way Sean Miller is going to like it with his assistant coaches this year, I think it's going to be interesting how many changes they make throughout a first half and a second half. I think they'll start probably with Maddox and also and Maddox, excuse me, and Foster. But I think the question is, where do you go from there? And I think you have with Trey Green and so many different options there, it's going to help the Xavier bench throughout the season.
Last preseason award. Give me your biggest surprise. So say at the end of the year, I didn't expect that, or a lot of fans didn't expect that from him.
I want to say Jerome Hunter. I think he's going to be, interesting to see as we get through the season and how his potential grows. But it is a big thing he's coming back off of, and I don't know if I'm going to choose him. I mean, I like to say it was him. I also like to say it was Trey Green. I think I'll go Trey Green. There was a lot of promise from him last year as that one guard, but also see him as a one guard moving McKnight maybe to the two guard, or maybe Green as a two guard and McKnight the one guard. But I say I'll go Trey Green just because I don't know what I expect to see from Hunter right now.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go Marcus Foster just because he hasn't been getting the attention within the transfer portal and maybe wasn't as highly sought out after as as Maddox and Conwell were. So I think Marcus Foster is going to be in that starting five. He was the second leading scorer in that Dayton exhibition, and he didn't shoot great from three a season ago, but we've seen from his first couple of years with Furman he has that ability. If he can bring that to the table, he's a really good creator inside the paint. He can run point guard a little bit if he has to. He dishes the ball well, but he's so big and physical that he could back down a smaller guard, which makes him a really tough matchup. So Marcus Foster is my biggest surprise coming into the year. Preseason predictions now. We'll start. All is said and done. Talking before the Big East tournament, let's say, what's this 31 through 31 games, 11 non-con, 20 conference games. What's Xavier's final regular season record?
Oh, that's such a tough question. That's like throwing a crystal ball. But you start pretty well. You got Texas Southern and you got IU, Indy, and Jackson State. So you should win the first three. You get a little tougher. You get Wake Forest at home, South Carolina, and then of course you take on a very tough Big East where you take on every team at least twice. So I like to say we get at least, 20 wins, 23, but it's going to be tough. I'll give us 22 wins this year. So that's where I'm going to put us right now, but I hope it's more.
22 and 9. I think that's a pretty good spot. A lot of it depends on some of the question marks around Big East teams. Like St. John's is one of those biggest ones. Marquette's another big one as well. I'm optimistic. I really am optimistic. I'll give the Xavier team wiggle room for one non-conference loss and yeah, one non-conference loss, and I think they go 14-6 in the Big East. So my final prediction is 24-7. I think that's how they'll finish out the regular season. Place in the Big East at those 22 wins, like you talked about, that probably puts them what fourth, third. I like Xavier finishing second in the Big East this year, maybe a tie for second with Creighton sitting there at 14-6. Once again, I'm pretty optimistic and I think there are a lot of Big East teams who have very experienced players, very experienced teams. Um, Before we end, the final prediction, when all is said and done, the Savior
Well,
team
let's
is
let's
lost.
bounce around the Big East real fast. I know
Right.
we mentioned UConn and we talked about Creighton, St. John's. I know Kalkbrenner comes back. UConn loses some talent, but what do you expect to see from some of the other teams this year inside of the Big East Conference?
I think UConn, you kind of know what you're getting. They're returning a decent amount of talent, but if you looked at the offseason last year, they had won the national championship 2 years ago. Didn't bring back a ton, brought back half of their scoring maybe, and still were able to figure it out. They had a great portal class. They had a great recruiting class. I think it's the same story this year, just not as good. So I think they're a top 10 team. I think they're going to win the Big East, but I don't think they're winning the national championship per se. Creighton's really experienced. Kalkbrenner's great. You get Mason Miller back. You get Steve Ashworth back, and they're going to be that tied with Xavier. I think at that second spot. I think Marquette takes a step back. I like Cam Jones, but I don't know how much help he has on the offensive side of things. And it's hard for me to be big on St. John's just with what we've seen for the last 6 years. They definitely are going to be a tournament team. I just don't know if they're that top 25 team. So that's my take on the top of the Big East.
Yeah, I thought last year only getting three teams in from the Big East was kind of a letdown to a conference
Yeah,
that was really
definitely.
tough from every team last year. I like Cam Jones. I do think losing a lot of talent from Marquette hurts them a lot this year. St. John's, as you mentioned, they have a legendary Hall of Fame head coach, which I think does help. But also, you have to build that up, and it's going to take more than maybe 2 years. So I don't know if this is the year for them. I do think they're a tournament team. And UConn, I think, takes a step back. The three-peat is a possibility, Ben. But the
Okay.
question is if they can get it done. I don't know if they'll get it done. They're definitely one of the best teams inside the Big East. But I think Xavier, as a lot of Xavier fans are hopeful, I think we're right there with them. And hopefully we can be the team to be able to win this regular season as we get there later into March.
Um, the last prediction I wanted to make because it's one of the most important ones. Xavier loses their last game of the year. What round is it in? How far does Xavier go in March Madness?
You're throwing another crystal ball at us here today.
Hey, I gave you time to prepare for this. I said I was going to ask you this before the
I
show.
know you did. I know you did. Well, I mentioned it was, you want to say Sweet 16, but I would say they can get farther than that. So I'm going to go Elite Eight. I don't think a
Wow.
Final Four is going to happen. I hope so. We never been there, but I'll say probably Elite Eight this year. I'm not gonna go push it any further than that right now.
So I like a bigger regular season than you do for the Xavier team. I think Sweet 16 though. I'd like to be wrong, but I think when it gets down to it, there's some really good teams in college basketball, and I just haven't seen enough yet to put them in Elite Eight. But who knows? Maybe talk to me at the end of the non-conference slate, and I'll say something different. Scheduling news: Quincy Oliveri had a nice one-on-one sit down with him. That should be coming out later this week. But we're gonna wrap it up tonight. Get you out to Cintas Center at 7:30 p.m. Xavier Musketeers start their 2024-2025 men's basketball season with Texas Southern. Both of us will be at the game. I'll provide some coverage, some recaps from the Cintas Center, and be pumping out content for tonight. But John, any last thoughts before the season?
I'm looking forward to it. I hope everybody else is as well. I know you are, Ben, and
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's gonna be exciting as we get there and get ready rolling for tomorrow.
It'll be a fun one. Thanks everyone for tuning in. He's John Baldridge, John Ben Haller.